Welcome to TradeNMDI.com. This is John. This report is for the 14th of May. Well, we talked about it. We were expecting a little bit of weakness with the soft steel breakdown a little bit. Once we broke below that 2867 previous algo level, we tried to push back to it. We weren't able to hold on to that. There just wasn't any interest at that particular point, and all we're doing is just coming right back into the range. So we would expect, well, at least to the 61% line. Let's go put those numbers up so you can see them, and then down to that 2735. So first we're going to be looking at the 62. Market's currently down around 30 at this particular point, all within the same expectation. What I'm looking for is to see whether or not you get a further decrease from NASDAQ on that clean DOC spread right there. And if that causes us to become more uniformed with the S&P, we're going to start seeing more and more states open up and the divergence between the two. And I think that's going to cause a lot of shifts between where people want to allocate their investment dollars, simply because of that difficulty of this split between not having things open uniformly. And again, you're going to be continually facing trouble until you have free travel. And until that happens, I think that there's just an endless source of potential difficulties in getting things ramped up. And so the question will be how soon that can be smoothed. And whether or not the numbers are really under control and you maintain this stability within hospitals not given the disease. From a euro standpoint, you can see that we're still just at the same range. They're going to keep trying to hold it as best they can around there. The difficulty is that you have such a sad situation in Europe. It's really hard to justify even a euro at that value, even given what the U.S. is doing, because all the other countries are doing pretty much the same thing. So as much as you have the gloom and doomers, this isn't happening in a vacuum. All countries are doing exactly the same thing as far as the money print, everything else to help their domestic populations weather this. So there's an equilibrium to that, and I think people forget that when they think about just the U.S. spending this. It's proportional to what everyone else is trying to do as well. This is CL, so this is the continuous contract of oil. Just gives it a little bit clearer. Even if we shrink this, you can see how clean this decline has been from the breakdown, and it's just continuing. Now we're in rising gold, and that just shows you how rising gold works within that. And then you had that buy configuration took place right about there, and that's led to this modest increase. This is a little more representative than USO now, because the ETF being changed given the previous negative yield that was taking place with the contracts. It's better to look at the futures in this particular case. And there goes gold just a little bit. We are seeing now stories about the retail price of food, and then starting to climb dramatically. We're going to see if that continues to maintain itself, and whether or not there is more upside pressure on oil with more volume. And that really is going to be the test, because they can turn the spigot on as needed, but there's just a huge glut, and how fast things really turn around will determine how quickly that glut is taken up and whether or not there is any upside pressures. I thought I'd shrink down the 5K chart because I just wanted to show that these confluences of areas. So we started off with the weakness, stayed back in between, just filled it right back into the exact same levels. And at that point, there really just wasn't much activity. There was a zero DOC steel reset, and we just kept sliding until we started to see declining 100% lines. And that happened on gold right at the zero. So that's always a tough one, because it usually is pretty weak going on. And it barely made it to the 50% retrace, but then you have such a dramatic decline that once the 100% reached the previous algo number, we started to just base within that. And then finally it built up to the point where it broke to a little bit new low, and that drove it right back up to the peaks. So let's just enlarge that back up so that we can get some spacing. And then currently We went from that 100% move, and we've just been in a kind of chaotic, which is interesting to see this kind of post-market back and forth. There's been a lot going on the political front, a lot of talk about the China difficulties heating up, and that is going to cause a lot of uncertainty that I think is probably going to even make more challenges for the Fed interventions and where they choose to go in. Certainly at these levels, we're not looking at a situation where there's a problem with anything at this particular point from a activity standpoint. We have our clear lines, and as they get broken, they become the new resistance and then new supports down below, and it's just a matter of following those. And so every time new positive extremes come in, even when this happened earlier in the day from here, we just came back and pretty much filled those, bouncing off of them. You come back and test them again, and it's just a question of whether there's more liquidity. We ended up with quite a bit of sigma event as we were trailing down in this particular case, and that's led to this breakdown that we're currently looking at. So I would imagine that we're seeing from the daily, obviously, increase in the steel and that, but we're really not yet seeing it from a 50K standpoint. So there could potentially see a little bit further decline going into this. There's nothing special about the time of the month or anything like that. So this is just going to be more gyrations, but the trend following of them has been excellent. I mean, these ranges have still been fantastic from a volatility standpoint, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So that makes it beautiful to be able to just follow those and go with what the readings are. As always, though, I will continue to put up charts at the Skype chat. Trade well.